In the last two example videos, I've created a simple guest book where users can enter their name and have that added to a list of guests that have visited the page. This is what it looks like currently. So you've got your name on the left-hand side. So if I put my name in here and click OK, it says hello, and then after a while it adds my name to a list. And then if someone else comes along and adds their name gets added to the list as well. But the problem is, as soon as you stop this sketch and run it again, all of those names are gone. So we need to find a way of saving data from one session to the next. And that's what I'm going to show in this example. What we're going to use is a P5JS table. And this is an object that's a bit like, you could think of it as a bit like a spreadsheet table. It has columns going down. So, you can store things like the ID of a column, a name, a date, really anything you want. And they can basically be numbers or strings. And then you can have an arbitrary number of rows. So row 0, row 1, row 2, row 100, row 339, whatever. And you can add to this as more data comes in. And the cool thing about it is with this P5 table object, you can also download and save it to your computer, and then you can upload it into your sketch as well. So that's one way of having data saved from one session to the next. If I go to the P5JS web editor, I've got the sketch from last time, and I'm going to just jump into the reference, and where you want to go is at the top here. If you click into the I/O section for input output, and there's actually quite a few different ways of getting data into and out of your sketches. You can use JSON, which you might have heard of. It's a very commonly used format in JavaScript, just for a way of storing data. Again, it's just text, just a text file. A simple basic text file, just strings of text, lines of text from a text file. Load table is the one that we're going to be using. XML is another kind of older data format. You can load like bytes if you're loading something like an image or a binary format, and then you can request stuff from other websites as well. But today what we're going to look at is the load table method. So where I'm going to start is actually in the saved strings method. So what this shows us is, oh, sorry, not save strings, I want to save table. Let's just go back here. I clicked on the wrong one. Yeah, not save strings, save table. So what you can see here is that we're declaring a variable to hold our table object, and then we're creating a new P5 table object in the setup, and then we're setting up those columns, ID, species, name here. But in the one that I'm going to create, it's going to have an ID, the name of the guest, and the date that they visited. And then here it's adding some data into that row. It's creating a new row for the table and then adding data into the row. So we're going to do the same thing. Whenever a guest enters their name through that little text box, we're going to add a row for them into this table. So I'm going to switch back to my sketch and set up those variables that I just talked about. So let table, I just declare it there, and then in the setup function, I'm going to create a new table object. With these three columns. So table equals new p5.table, and then table.add column, and just let me check the reference again, add column, and then it's just the name of the column that you want. So add column for ID, a column for the name, and a column for the date. So we've created our table object, we've given it 3 columns. Now let's put some data into it when the user enters their name. So if I scroll down to the bottom, oh, and I did a little bit of a cleanup on the sketch. I just moved the 2 parts of the drawing function into separate functions. So I made a function to draw the welcome part of the canvas and one to draw the list of guests, just to make it a bit tidier. So here in the name submitted, when we get that name, we also want to store an ID and a date. This is where we would store the data. And I liked the way that in the example here from P5.js, they generate an ID just by counting the number of rows that there currently are in the table and then subtracting 1 from that. So if there's 1 row in the table, it will get the ID of 0. So the IDs will start from 0 and count up. So if I'll just copy that and create a new row for the table and populate it with the data. So we can pretty much keep that the same. I mean, that's pretty generic code there. Then if I say new row.set string name, and that can just be the value of the name that we've just got out of the text field. And then we need to also calculate the date. So I'm going to say so let d equals new date, and I'm going to store that in the table as a string using a method of the date object called toIsoString. New row.set string date d.toIsoString. Bit of a funny sounding function, but basically it just gives you a way of turning that JavaScript date object into a string that's kind of human readable and then can also be read back in later on. And so you can see here, if I create a new date and then set it to an ISO string, it gives me this string. So the year, the month, the day, and then the time. So it's a little hard to read, but basically I can read it back in and it gives me the time. So this is one way to serialize, to store in text the date. So we've got that. So every time a user adds in their name, it's going to be stored into the table. And now I need a way of saving the table to files. So I don't want to do that every single time. I'm just going to do it when the user presses the S key. So I'm going to say function key pressed, and then check for the S key. So if key equals S, save table, downloaded guests.csv. So let's see, put in my name, Jared, adds me to the list, and now if I press S, what happens is that file gets downloaded to my computer, and if I switch to my downloads folder, you can see it there, and it's got the extension CSV. If you've turned extensions off on your computer, you may not see this. I would always turn your file extensions on when you're doing any programming. Makes a lot easier to avoid mistakes where you don't have the right file name extension. But here we can see it's a .csv, and if I just double click it to open it, it opens in Excel, which is really convenient because one of the things I might want to do is generate some dummy data for my sketch to use. So I might want to pretend that Bob has visited my site, and maybe that happened like last month, and maybe Alice has also visited the site, but it was on the 11th. And if I just save that, when you save a CSV from Excel, it will always give you this dialog saying, are you sure you're going to lose features? You want to say yes. You definitely do want to save it as CSV, not as an Excel file, because P5JS can't read Excel files, but it can read these CSV files, because basically it's just a text file, and I'll show you in a second what it looks like. So I've saved some extra data into there, and now what I can do is upload it into my sketch. So I had a previous one here from a previous little test run that I did. So I'm going to add a file and upload that. It's already uploaded. And I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to rename it just as guests.csv. Now it's probably also a good idea to keep anything like data files or images into separate folders. So I'm going to add a folder for data. And let's see if I can remove this. I'm not sure if I can. I might need to just delete it and re-upload it into the correct location. So add file, I'll just drop it on there again. Let's rename that as guests.csv. Okay, and you can actually see there when I've got it open, this is the format of the file. It's just a bare text file, just with commas separating each of the items, and then a new line for each row. All right, so we've got that data saved. Now what I want to do is, when my sketch first loads, I want to load that data in so that we don't get this problem where when I stop the sketch and run it again, all of the guests that previously visited have gone. So let's go back to the Save Table reference, and I'm going to click back and go back into the I/O section. And this time, rather than looking at saving the table, what I want to look at is loading the table. So here you can see Load Table. And this shows us sort of the other equation of what we do with these tables. We save them once we've got some data, but then we also load the data up when we first start. So here you can see it uses the preload function and then loads the data from wherever we've uploaded that file to on our sketch. So yeah, let's do that for a start. I'll go back here and I'm going to add a preload function because we want the data to be all fully loaded before the sketch proper starts running. I'm going to say function preload table equals load table, and then what we do is give it the path to the file. So here it's going to be data/guests.csv, and then we tell it the format. So this is a CSV file, a comma separated value file, and then we tell it whether it has headers or not, and this one does. Just let me double check those. Yeah, just header, CSV, and then the path. And once that table is loaded, in the setup function, we can then loop over all of the rows in the table and use the data out of them to put into our guests array and draw it to the screen. So basically what I want to do is say for let I equals 0, I is less than table.get row count, I think was the name of the function, and then I plus plus. And then just to check that this is working properly, I'm going to say console, I'll say let R equals table.getRow I, and then let n equals r.get string name, and console.log n. I just logged the letter n. What I want to really do is log the variable n. So I shouldn't have put the quotes there. So look, there you can see we've got Jared, Bob, and Alice. And remember, I only saved Jared from the website, and I kind of added these two as dummy data. So this can be really useful when you're setting up a sketch and you want to make it look like there's a hall of fame or something like that, and you've got 10 different high scores. You can manually put them into an Excel file, a CSV file, and save them and then load them into your sketch when it starts up. So we're getting the data, it's loading in properly. We just need to remember to make sure that it actually loads and then goes not just into this n variable, but actually into our list of guests. So you can see over on the right hand side, the guests are still empty. So I need to say guests.push n, and that will put each name into the list of guests. There we have it, Jared, Bob, and Alice. And now if I add another name, so like Harry. Harry goes into the list of guests, and then if I save it, it downloads it again. Here it is in my download folder, but it's number 1 this time. And if I open it up in Excel, I can see that Harry has been added to the list. Now there is still something that's a little bit cumbersome about this, and really it's we haven't really quite solved the problem that I started with here, right? So if I stop the sketch and run it again, Harry doesn't show up because I've only got that data saved in this file on my local computer. What I need to do is each time kind of re-upload and put that back right over the top of this guests.csv file each time. So that is a little bit tedious, or I can also actually probably go in here and put 3 Harry and add that in directly to the file. So let me sort of show you, because this is probably not what you're used to seeing on the web, when you enter information into a web form or like a Google spreadsheet or something. It just saves there, and then the next time you go to the website, it's there for you to see. So let's just take a quick look at how that works normally on a website. So let's close that one down, and if I go here, what's that beeping for? I'll just get rid of this one. I'm just going to draw a sketch of how data is usually kind of handled and passed around on the web, just to give you a quick overview of that. So let's say you are on your laptop and you connect to a website, P5 editor, and you put that data, Harry, basically into a web page. Now that web page it's actually being shown on your computer, right? So even though like when we're working in JavaScript, really the location that we're working at is on the computer itself. It's in the browser. That's really where the JavaScript that we work with in P5.js happens. It runs in the browser. But that web page has come from a server somewhere on the internet, right? Called p5js, right, .org. That has sent the information for that web page to your computer, and on here, on your screen, that's where we're running our JavaScript. Now, if we want to save some data back to the server, we need to send that data back and have it saved here on p5js.org or on some other server that we can connect to. And we need to have permission to do that, and we don't in this case. We can upload stuff through the editor, but when we're running a sketch, we can't save it back to p5js.org. So what we're doing in this case is when we're saying save table, we're actually just taking the data that's in our local web browser and saving it locally onto our computer as a CSV file, and then manually uploading that data to p5js.org to the editor, so that when we load it next time, the data comes through. So it's a little bit convoluted. I mean, it's actually really quite. It gets complicated quickly. So what I would say to you basically for a start is just try and get this like downloading of data into a CSV working, and then uploading that into your sketch, so that you can, like, when you show the proof of concept, you can show, okay, if we had a live server on the web somewhere that was saving the data, it would work kind of like this. But for the purposes of a proof of concept, saving some or producing some data in a CSV file and including that with your sketch as something that gets loaded when the sketch first runs, that's going to be a perfectly fine way to approach the assignment. Well, good luck with that. Let me know if you run into any problems. Happy creative coding, and I'll look forward to seeing what you produce based on this example.